Gender and Travel, Comparison of the Treatment of Travelers to the Middle East. One of the things I noticed while in this class was how people interact with the people from the place they're visiting, also how the people there interact with the visitors. I read the way the women were treated as opposed to the men who wanted to immerse themselves in another culture. Even though some people were treated in a way that I considered harsh, they still managed to write about the experience. So they must have looked beyond the circumstances and found a way to document the events that took place. I would like audience to see that gender has a place in the treatment received as they are visiting certain cultures around the world. In this case, I will discuss travelers to the Middle East, depending on the style of travel writing, that is diary, ethnography, photography, captivity, letters, home, or autobiographical. You get a different tone of the visitor. Letters and diaries are more personal, whereas autobiographies are a bit more formal in nature. I enjoyed the first-hand accounts, which I think is considered autobiographical, and the letters. They were very personal and I get more out of those accounts. I learn how they felt at the time of the event or happening rather than just learning of the event. Even though learning of the event is a good thing, when that is personalized, it's a lot better to me. I can see it through the eyes of the traveler and not my own. This is why I like the letters of Lady Duff Gordon, Letters from Egypt, and the letters of Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, Turkish Embassy letters, because they had the general travel blog sense with personal twist in them to reveal traits of themselves as well. I also liked the autobiographical writing style of Joseph Pitts. It was extremely graphic in its detail, which is good for the reader, but lacked the personality of a diary or a letter. Wortley's letters are filled with details about garments and the people's customs, and with that, because it was a personal letter she wrote, I could detect that she is fond of the culture she is visiting. She said, "What is most extraordinary in their customs is matrimony, a ceremony I believe unparalleled all over the world." Montagu, page 139. That is a grand statement. Her fondness for the place and people is very evident, and it is my feeling is that she wouldn't say that in a formal document. In the same vein, the treatment she received was obviously great because her letters are focused on what went on around her and events that happened, but not bad events that happened to her. I read of her bragging almost to her family and loved ones back home. She didn't deny her family what they requested, but she did talk against them. Like in the case of the bomb of Mecca, her sister asked for a bomb that she heard was amazing, most likely from Wortley. She claimed the bomb would swell her face up and turn it red. As to the bomb of Mecca, I will certainly send you some, but it is not easily got as you suppose it, and I cannot in conscience advise you to make use of it. I had a present of a small quantity, which I assure you is very valuable, of the best sort, and with great joy applied it to my face, expecting some wonderful effect to my advantage. The next morning the change was indeed wonderful. My face swelled to a very extraordinary size and all over red. Wortley, pg 105. A lot of what she said are grand statements, like what she said in letter 31. I dare say you expect at least something very new in this letter. After I have gone a journey not undertaken by any Christian for some 100 years. Montagu, page 72. Very grandiose word pictures being painted. Even if true, there was definitely a more humble to tell her family, who by the way has not had this experience. It is possible that she was just happy about her travels as of late and very excited. She also made fun of at least one her letter recipients, laughing at her for calling Greeks slaves. I heartily beg your ladyship's pardon, but I really could not forbear laughing heartily at your letter and the commissions you are pleased to honor me with. You desire me to buy you a Greek are subjects and not slaves. The Greeks are subjects and not slaves. Wortley 104. It is possible her sister didn't take like I did, and that's fine. Everyone has their own perspective. I think the gender difference between Wortley and Pitts made their experience massively different. Of course my theory depends on whether Wortley would have been accosted like Pitts. My assumption is she would not have, but of course that's only a theory. Pitts on the other hand had a mixed experience. It was brave, adventurous, dangerous and unpredictable. It's all in the writing. There was surprises in the midst of all the detail. Even the picture set up the opening material as exciting, and you really don't know what to expect from the reading. It's true, but it also an adventure, and this true story did not disappoint. It is exciting to me, a man at 41 years of age in 2018, who wouldn't want to go on that boat on a trip. I contrast to Wortley's story. This one brings up traumatic content early on, with Pitts being accosted by the Moors who boarded their ship. I being but young, the enemy seemed to me as monstrous, ravenous creatures, which made me cry out, "O Master, I am afraid they will kill us and eat us." "No, no, child," said my master, "they will carry us to Algiers and sell us." Pitts page 225. Already worldly is no comparison to his story. They obviously had two totally different experiences. That must have been very scary to a young man in a part of the world he was unfamiliar with. I see why he cried out, because I would been ready for war until I found out their intentions were not to kill us. He did not elaborate any more about how he felt in that moment, which is the lack of personality I mentioned before. Both accounts were very detailed. It's a common thread. I think Wortley used the details of the dresses the ladies wore and how the waiter brought the tea and how the women doesn't spend any money as a way to avoid any bad events. There is no way she all that time in another culture and nothing bad happened. I believe she experienced something unpleasant, but her friends and family would never hear about it. Pitts didn't try to impress anyone. His story was impressive enough. His account was full of orders he had to follow. Granted, he was technically in slavery. I still tend to think it wasn't as bad as it sounds because he had the forethought to document it. If the circumstances were horrible enough, there would be no written account, in my opinion, at least not as big an account it was. I noticed he didn't have large portions of his story talking of his labor or even labor of other people he worked with. He focused on the lifestyle of his captors and their customs. He must have wanted to tell his own countrymen of the other culture and not necessarily his daily experiences. On page 299 in Pitt's description, he talked about their daily routine in such detail it's hard to see if he was a slave or a guest. After which the Paluans face each other, and then both at once slapped their hands on their thighs, then slapped them together, and then lift up their hands as high as their shoulders and cause the palms of their hands to meet, and with the same, dash their heads against one another 3 times, so hard that many times the blood runs down. Pitts pg 299. He was a slave, and the worst thing he mentioned was the way they discipline him. I roared out to feel the pain of his cruel strokes, but the more I cried, the more furiously he laid on upon me, and to stop the noise of my crying, he would stamp me with his feet on my mouth, at which I begged him to dispatch me out the way, but he continued beating me. I begged him to forbear, and I would turn and breathing hanging by my feet. Pitts pg 312. Again, nothing of the sort written in the letters from Wortley. During the story he did have a moment of personal interjection. He actually wrote his father a letter. He showed the letters, but his account was still impersonal. He only included excerpts of the letters. They had a correspondence, multiple letters written back and forth. Yet I cannot choose but call thee dear and loving son, although thou hast denied thy Redeemer that bought thee, especially considering the tendencies of thy age, the cruelty of thy usage and the strength of thy temptations. Pitts pg 315. Apparently he got caught by his captors and they wanted to continue the communication to meet their own ends. In his own words, in 2 or 3 days after this, I writ my father a second letter, which I was forced to do by piecemeal, in a great deal in danger and fear, in which I gave him a perfect account of the whole matter and told him the naked truth, lest he should have thought that what I did voluntarily and without any coercion. Pitts page 315. He was working for his captors when he wrote it to keep peace from coming to get him, so he was obviously profiting his masters in some way. Another factor that makes me think he respected his masters and the culture was his conversion to Mohammedan. By all manly attitudes he should not have done this, but if it helped him survive, that's the only way he should do it. If his life was not in danger, that tells me he really does respect the culture and wanted to be a part of it. So in conclusion, I feel that men in a foreign land are considered more, even if they aren't treated that way. They still look at them sideways, very suspiciously. It's obvious if that culture enslaved you, they didn't tolerate men roaming through their country all willy-nilly, as the cliché goes. I could be wrong, but I believe a woman traveling abroad, even back then, had an easier go of it, because they're perceived as less direct threat. Thank you for watching, and please, like and subscribe.